It was on the back seat of his car, a tiny red jacket, size 5T, with a cartoon unicorn stitched on the front, and a name I didn't recognize written in Sharpie on the tag, Avery. The zipper was halfway down like someone had taken it off in a hurry and it smelled like strawberries. Not real strawberries, but the kind in dollar store shampoo, sweet and synthetic and way too familiar from somewhere I couldn't quite place. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I just finished practice. The wind was brutal that afternoon, and my car was in the shop, so I asked Dad if I could take his since he was working from home. He tossed me the keys like it was nothing. No warning, no, hey, don't touch the back seat or anything like that. I dropped my gym bag in the back, and that's when the jacket fell out from underneath a grocery bag. There was a crayon drawing, too, all folded up, with a stick figure family and two adults, one small kid with yellow hair, and a house drawn in pink. Not our house. Not even close. I just stared at it for a second. The jacket. The smell. The drawing. Like my brain couldn't sync the image with reality. I knew Dad's car. Hell, I helped him vacuum it out last month. The man's OCD about keeping it spotless. But this? This didn't belong. And the worst part? I knew it immediately. I knew. I drove home with the windows down, even though it was freezing, like I could air it out of my head. I didn't touch the jacket again. I put it back exactly how I found it, stuffed under the bag like it had been hidden there on purpose. The drawing, too, folded tight, not torn, not crumpled, just tucked away like someone was saving it. Dad didn't mention anything that night, nothing. He asked how practice was, if my shoulder was still bothering me, and then sat down to watch his usual Thursday reruns of Frasier. I remember because the laugh track irritated the hell out of me that night. Mom was upstairs most of the time. She came down once to grab her tablet charger and didn't even look at either of us. No one said anything weird, no tension, no weird pauses, which honestly somehow made it worse, like, shouldn't something have felt off? The next day I checked the garbage in the garage. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought he'd tossed something out from the car, I don't know. But it was the same as always. Coffee cups, receipts, a box from Costco. No kids' stuff. No clues. By Saturday, I convinced myself I was being dramatic. Like maybe he picked up someone else's kid. A coworker. A neighbor. It's not illegal to be helpful, right? But that only lasted until Sunday morning when I heard him on the phone in the kitchen. He didn't know I was awake. He was whispering, which he never does, and the only thing I caught was, "I'll be there before noon. Just make sure she's got her coat." I froze. Not even because of the words, it was the tone. Gentle, familiar, too casual to be professional. He saw me walking in and hung up fast, said it was work. I just nodded and grabbed a banana even though I wasn't hungry. That's become my thing lately, grabbing food I don't want, pretending to be busy chewing so I don't have to speak. Sunday afternoon he left to meet a client. He wore cologne. My dad hasn't worn cologne in like years, said it gives him headaches. Mom didn't even ask where he was going. She barely looked up from the tablet. She's been on it a lot lately. Games, I think, or some puzzle app. I've tried to glance over her shoulder, but she angles it away every time like she's guarding state secrets. That night, I went out to the car again, pretending to grab something from the trunk. The jacket was gone. I don't know what I expected. Maybe for it to still be there so I could tell myself it wasn't a fluke. But he'd cleaned the whole car. Vacuumed, wiped down the dash, Febrezed the seats. I could still smell the strawberries faintly, but everything else? Gone. Like it was never there. He came out while I was still standing there. Said something dumb like, you should check your tires more often. Your front left's getting low. I nodded, didn't say anything. He walked back inside without waiting for a reply. And I remember thinking he didn't ask what I was doing out there. Like, he knew. I haven't told anyone. Not yet. Not Parker, not Mom, not even myself out loud. But something's off. I feel it. Every day now, like I'm holding a cup filled to the rim and someone keeps bumping my elbow. And here's the thing. I keep thinking back to something Dad used to say when I was little. Like, real little. He'd say, "Honesty's the only thing they can't take from you, bud." I think about that a lot now, because if that's true, what does it mean when you give it away yourself? The second phone was on the counter by the fruit bowl. Black case, no lock screen photo, no pop socket. Just plain and quiet, almost forgettable. Which, I guess, is the point. Dad never leaves his phone out, like ever. He's the guy who carries it in his shirt pocket even around the house, sets it face down at dinner, and keeps it charging behind his pillow at night. So when I saw that one just sitting there next to the bananas like it belonged, something in my chest locked up. I was looking for a fork, I swear. I was trying to microwave leftover meatloaf and the drawer was jammed again. Because our kitchen is from 1992 and no one bothers fixing anything anymore. And that's when the ringtone went off, not his usual one. Something soft, like bells or some lullaby. And then the name popped up. Cassie with a baby's face behind it. Like a literal baby. Cheeks puffed out, big grin, wispy blonde hair. She had those stick-on earrings toddlers wear. I didn't move. I just stared at it until the screen went black again. It felt like I wasn't breathing the whole time. And maybe I wasn't. Not because I was scared, it wasn't that. It was more like I didn't want to know what came next. And I didn't answer. I didn't touch it. I just slowly slid the drawer shut, left the fork where it was, and walked upstairs like nothing happened. Like maybe if I didn't pick it up, it would disappear. The weirdest part? I wasn't mad. Not then. Just blank. Like my head went white noise. I sat on the edge of my bed for 20 minutes before I even realized I'd never reheated the food. And that ringtone, that soft-ass lullaby, kept playing in my head like a virus. Later, I remembered how Dad always kept his phone on silent at home. Said it was for focus, or that it kept his head clear. Which sure made sense when I was 10 and thought he was a genius. Now it just sounds like someone trying not to get caught. So yeah, I started looking. Not stalking exactly, as just connecting dots. When he left the next day saying he had a last-minute meeting in Nampa, I checked timestamps on his calendar. I compared that with a public Facebook post Cassie made, tagged in a Boise strip mall, smiling with her daughter and holding a balloon that said, "Best day ever." Dad wasn't in the picture, but his jacket was. The navy one with the leather trim he only wears when he's trying to look put together. I guess I wanted to believe it could still be a coincidence. Like, maybe they're just friends. Maybe it's work. But then I found her Instagram. It wasn't even private, just buried under a username with her maiden name, a bunch of kid pics and a bio that said, "Grateful single mama to my miracle girl Narasadish, Boise life, Mario mom truths." The kid? Her name's Avery. And yeah, there it was. A photo from 2 weeks ago. Avery on a playground somewhere by the river wearing that same red unicorn jacket I found in Dad's backseat. I zoomed in just to be sure. Same patch on the sleeve. Same frayed zipper. That cheap strawberry shampoo kind of came back to me in waves. I didn't show it to anyone. I saved it to my camera roll and then just stared at the screen. I wasn't sure what to feel. I mean, I wasn't even sure who I was supposed to tell. My mom? She'd just ask why I was looking through his stuff. My dad? What would I even say? Hey, do you have a secret toddler in Boise? God, what the hell was I supposed to do? The thing is, the house started getting quieter. Like the kind of quiet where you hear the fridge hum too loud or the furnace kick on and off. Mom stopped cooking altogether. Most nights it was whatever you could heat up in the microwave or sandwiches if we remembered to buy bread. She didn't ask where Dad was anymore, didn't text him. Just sort of floated around the house like she was stuck on autopilot. And Dad, he started leaving earlier in the mornings. Coming home way later. Always with some half-baked reason about traffic or work calls I didn't even ask. Not because I was scared of the answer, but because I already knew what he'd say. And I couldn't stand hearing him lie like that. Not while I still had a screenshot of Avery smiling on a swing, saved on my phone like evidence in a crime I hadn't decided to prosecute yet. That weekend, I texted someone I hadn't talked to in months. Parker. We used to be close back in middle school before he moved to Eagle and got into music and longboards and whatever. But I remembered once back in 8th grade, he told me his dad cheated. Said he walked in on him kissing someone who wasn't his mom at a gas station parking lot of all places. I didn't even know how to respond at the time. I just stood there like an idiot and said, Damn, that sucks, because I was 13, and what the hell do you say to that? Anyway, I texted him, if your dad lied to everyone about everything, what would you do? He didn't answer for like an hour. Then all he wrote back was, depends who he lied to. And I guess that's when it hit me. My dad wasn't just lying to my mom. He wasn't just hiding some side relationship or weekend hangout or whatever. He'd lied to me. All those drives, all those talks, all that honesty is everything crap he used to say when I was little. So now I'm sitting here typing this at 1:37 a.m. Lights off except my desk lamp and the blue glow from my phone screen. The photo's still there. Avery in her unicorn jacket, hair tied up like she's ready for preschool. No idea who I am. No idea I even exist. And I'm still not sure what to do. Which is kind of the worst part. Like, what happens when the person you trust most turns into someone you can't even look in the eye? Because I've got this feeling, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is only the beginning. I don't even know what I thought I'd find out there. Walking through that weirdly quiet neighborhood on the edge of Boise that's full of matching townhouses and fake vintage street lamps and those sad little trees that look like they were just planted 2 weeks ago, but I guess I needed to see it for myself. Not a guess, really, more like a compulsion that had been crawling around in the back of my brain ever since I put her name into that search bar and found her whole life just sitting there in public view, as if none of it was a secret to begin with. The address wasn't hard to get, which maybe says more about the internet than it does about me, but still, I stared at it for 2 days before I actually worked up the nerve to go, telling my mom I was heading downtown to look for a book for English. Technically true, I did walk into a bookstore, touched 2 hardcovers, and walked back out without even pretending to read the blurbs. Then I cut through 3 bus stops and took the long way into Sunnyside Crossing, which is one of those newish places with cookie-cutter porches and friendly HOA notices stuck to mailboxes about how colored chalk should only be used on private property. I walked slow, like I was counting cracks in the sidewalk, or timing my footsteps with the sound of wind through cheap vinyl siding. And by the time I reached her building, Unit 118, cream-colored, 2 small lawn chairs on the porch and one of those hanging planters with fake ivy trailing down from the beam, I already felt like I knew too much to walk away, but not enough to open my mouth, if that makes sense. Which it probably doesn't unless you've ever stood across the street from your father's second life and felt your own bones stop trusting the ground beneath them. His car was there. Same Honda, same clean rims, same stubborn little dent on the front passenger side that he used to joke about fixing next month back when we still drove to Home Depot together on Saturdays, like nothing in the world was fake. And right beside it, not even hidden or subtle, there was a bright pink scooter leaning against the fence with a tiny helmet resting on the handlebars, the kind with little cat ears molded into the top like a cartoon. I didn't move for maybe 5 minutes, maybe more, just stood in the shade of a sick-looking maple tree, pretending I was on a walk and absolutely not trying to figure out how to breathe without making a sound, and then the door opened. He stepped out first, holding her, not walking beside her or watching from the porch, but full-on arms around the waist, laughing, spinning her a little like some perfect moment in a commercial. And she was laughing too, that high-pitched kid laugh that makes strangers smile even if they don't like kids, and I swear for a second, I thought maybe I dreamed all of this because the way he looked at her was exactly how I remembered him looking at me when I was 5 and still thought he could fix anything. And then he kissed the top of her head. Not the way you kiss someone for show, but like he does it every day. I turned around before he saw me, or maybe he did and just didn't care. I honestly don't know which would hurt worse. And I started walking, not fast, but with the kind of weird mechanical pace that happens when your body's trying to keep your head from screaming. And I didn't stop until I was 2 miles away, sitting on a bench outside a hardware store trying to remember the last time I saw him smile like that at home. I didn't take the bus or call a ride, didn't text anyone or even check the time. I just kept walking, past shuttered diners and a mural I hadn't noticed before, through a part of Boise that smelled like car oil and melting snow, because for some reason I needed the pain in my legs more than I needed answers. By the time I got home, the sun was already down and the living room light was off, but I could hear the TV buzzing quietly behind the kitchen. My mom watching another one of those renovation shows where people knock down walls just to cry in granite kitchens. And she didn't look up when I came in, just said something like, "There's leftovers in the fridge if you want," without waiting to hear if I did. I went to my room, closed the door, and pulled out the old photo album I hadn't touched since middle school. The one with the puffy leather cover and those sticky plastic pages that always make that awful peeling sound. And I sat on the carpet flipping through birthday parties, camping trips, baseball games, all those moments where Dad looked solid and sure in there. And I kept staring at this one picture from my ninth birthday where he's crouched beside me with his hand on my shoulder. And we're both smiling wide like we actually believed it meant something. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a lie we both agreed to without knowing it. He came home just before 10. Door creaked the same way. Keys dropped into the same ceramic bowl. Same heavy footsteps across the kitchen. And I stood in the hallway and waited for him to say something. Anything. But he just opened the fridge, poured a glass of water, and leaned on the counter like it was a regular night. I stepped in and asked, "Would you tell me if you had another family?" Not as a joke, not as a trap. Just like I needed to say the words out loud to make them real. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just looked at me for half a second and said, "What kind of question is that?" Like I'd asked if he was buying a new lawnmower or something, and then he walked out. No follow-up, no denial, no confession. Just walked out. Later, my mom asked why I was being so quiet lately, and I almost told her. I swear I almost did. But she was already halfway up the stairs by the time I opened my mouth, and the words just died in my throat like they didn't belong there anyway. So I sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and I started writing. Not for school, not for anyone really, but because I needed to say it to someone who wasn't part of this mess. I didn't know what I wanted Cassie to say, maybe confirmation, maybe denial, maybe nothing. But I wrote anyway, and when I finished, I didn't hit send right away, just stared at the screen like it might change its mind, like maybe there was still a version of the story where I was wrong. But the thing is, I wasn't, and deep down, I already knew it. The notification came through while I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom that still has the same flickering light bulb above the mirror I keep forgetting to replace. And for a few seconds I didn't check it because I honestly assumed it was another dumb group chat from school, or one of those random 10% off ads from some store I don't even remember signing up for. But then I saw her name on the lock screen, and everything in me froze up like I'd suddenly forgotten how to breathe properly. When I opened the message and saw her words, "He told me you died when you were 9. Something in my chest caved in, not like a punch or a sharp blow, but more like a slow, thick weight that settled behind my ribs and refused to move no matter how many times I blinked at the screen trying to process what those words could possibly mean, in a world where I was still very much alive and standing there in socks next to a toothpaste-spotted sink. Attached to her message was a photo, a blurry scan of an old newspaper clipping, the kind people find in scrapbooks or plastic storage bins in a basement, with a headline that read, "Local boy presumed dead after river accident." And right below it was a school portrait I haven't seen in years, the one where I blinked at the wrong time and looked like I was half asleep, which means it was me. No question about it. And someone had put that lie in print and given it to her as the truth. I didn't sit down or even move at first. I just stared at my own face inside a lie so massive it made everything that came before feel like a warm-up. Like all the sneaking around and vague stories and long weekends suddenly snapped into sharp focus now that I knew he hadn't just been hiding me. He'd rewritten me out of existence in someone else's world. I rinsed out my mouth, let the water keep running, and sat down on the edge of the bathtub with the phone still in my hand and my toothbrush resting in the sink like I couldn't be bothered to clean up anymore. And for at least a full minute, I just kept reading the sentence over and over again. Not because I didn't understand it the first time, but because I was hoping that if I stared long enough, the words would reshape themselves into something less insane than what I already knew was real. Eventually, I texted back something short and direct, something that barely scratched the surface of what I wanted to say, because I didn't have the right vocabulary for this kind of betrayal, so I just typed, "I'm not dead. I just stopped being useful and left it there." Then I sat in the bathroom a little longer trying to remember if I had ever done something so wrong that it made me worth erasing from someone's entire life story. She asked if we could meet, somewhere quiet, public, nothing dramatic, and I told her yes, even though my body still felt disconnected from my brain, and I didn't know what I'd say or how I'd look her in the eye after learning she'd been told I drowned a decade ago, while I was actually living 4 miles away from her daughter's pink scooter and her freshly painted front porch. We met at a little corner cafe in downtown Boise, one of those places that tries too hard to look like it's not trying too hard, with chalkboard menus that lean crooked behind the counter and a fake cactus on every table. And I got there early by accident because I walked faster than I meant to. So I sat by the window and waited with a cup of water I didn't touch and a menu I didn't open, watching people pass by with dogs and shopping bags and absolutely no clue that inside this building, two strangers were about to open a wound that had been festering in silence for years. When she arrived, she brought Avery with her. Not because she wanted to complicate things, I think, but because she couldn't leave a little kid home alone and probably didn't have anyone to ask last minute. And as they came in holding hands and sharing a look I used to know from old family photos, I suddenly felt like I didn't have the right to be angry anymore because I could already tell she hadn't known, and that, maybe more than anything else, broke me. Avery looked at me with those wide, curious eyes that kids get when they don't know whether to smile or hide, and she gave me this half grin that felt like it belonged in another version of my life. The one I never got, the one he gave to her instead. And Cassie's face when she sat down was that perfect blend of confusion and pain and fury that only someone who has been lied to in layers can ever really wear without cracking under it. She kept her voice low the whole time, like she didn't want Avery to pick up on what we were really saying. And when she finally spoke, her exact words were, "If I had even the slightest idea, I would never have let her call him Dad." And I could tell by the way she said it that she wasn't just angry. She was humiliated, gutted, ripped in two between trying to protect her daughter and realizing she'd let a stranger into their home under false pretenses. I didn't respond right away, partly because I didn't know what would help, and partly because everything I'd been rehearsing in my head since that message came in suddenly felt pointless. And instead, I just nodded once and looked at Avery again while she stirred a straw through her chocolate milk like it was a science experiment and said something about how she liked her new shoes. I left 15 minutes later, not because I was overwhelmed or afraid, but because it felt wrong to stay in that booth any longer, pretending we were just two people talking over coffee when really we were picking through the wreckage of someone else's delusion. And by the time I stepped outside into the cold air and started walking back toward our neighborhood, I already knew I'd never be able to see my dad the same way again, no matter what he said when I got home. The walk was longer than it should have been, not by distance, but by weight. And with every block I passed, every trash can and driveway and bus stop, it felt like the version of me who used to think this would somehow work out was falling further behind until he just stopped existing altogether. And I was left carrying someone else's guilt like it belonged to me. When I got back to the house, Mom was in the kitchen unpacking groceries, stacking soup cans by size and expiration date like she always does when she's trying to stay in control of something. And I stood in the doorway watching her line up a row of black beans without noticing. I was even there until I said, without raising my voice or even changing my tone, "He didn't just lie to you. He told someone else I died." She turned slowly, not with surprise, but with that sharp, aching stillness that happens when your heart catches up to something your head has been avoiding, and I handed her my phone without another word and watched her scroll in total silence until her hand stopped shaking, and her eyes stopped blinking, and her mouth opened just enough to suggest a question that never came out. Then she dropped the phone. She grabbed the mug she'd been holding and slammed it so hard into the edge of the counter that the ceramic shattered into 4 uneven pieces across the floor, and when she finally looked at me, her face wasn't angry or devastated. It was blank in that horrible, heavy way that says something inside her had just shut off like a switch. He came home while we were still in the kitchen. He walked in with his usual lazy calm, set down his keys in the bowl near the door, and gave his usual, "Hey, what's up?" as he pulled off his jacket like nothing in the world had changed. But when he saw us standing there, me with my arms crossed, her with the broken mug pieces at her feet, and the phone still lit up on the counter, he froze for just a second before saying something so familiar it made my skin crawl. "I didn't know how to be who I needed to be," he said, and then added, "So I tried to start over." And I asked, because I couldn't not ask, "What did you think I was? Just some rough draft you could throw out?" He looked at the floor. He didn't answer. And then Mom left the room, came back with a duffel bag I hadn't noticed by the couch, and when he asked, "Where are you going?" she looked at him with that same blank expression and said, "You wanted to be a new person. Go be him somewhere else." She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. She just walked out, and this time he didn't follow. He left without taking much. Just one suitcase, the black one we used to take on road trips, the same one that still has the busted wheel from that time he yanked it too hard in the Salt Lake airport. And when the front door closed behind him, no one asked where he was going or when he'd be back. because at that point, the answers didn't matter as much as the fact that he didn't try to lie again before walking out. For the first few days, the house felt like it had been unplugged from something vital. Not like a dramatic movie silence, but more like a subtle absence of weight. Like a chair missing from the corner of a room that no one wants to mention, because then they'd have to say out loud who used to sit there. And my mom stopped going downstairs altogether, only coming down when she needed a drink or to open the front door for a delivery, and even then she barely looked anyone in the eye. The kitchen turned into this weird neutral zone. No smell of breakfast, no radio playing soft jazz like she used to do on Sunday mornings when she baked banana bread. Just boxes of cereal left out on the counter with mismatched spoons, and one of those half-gallon cartons of milk that someone forgot to close all the way, so it leaked slowly into the fridge and made everything smell like sour hope. I started waking up earlier, not because I had somewhere to be, but because the quiet made it easier to move through the house without running into anyone. I'd take out the trash before the bin filled all the way, do the dishes before they stacked too high, and wipe down the counters even though no one was using them, which I guess sounds like I was trying to keep things clean. But really, I think I was just trying to give myself something small I could control. My sister asked me one night, around 11:30, when she should have been asleep but wasn't, and I was standing at the sink, rinsing out a glass of water I didn't even drink. If Dad was coming back, and I didn't know how to say what I was thinking without breaking something, so I just looked at her and said, I don't know. Which wasn't a lie exactly, but definitely wasn't the kind of answer an 11-year-old needs when the only father she's ever known disappears with one bag and zero explanations. A few days later, I messaged Cassie. Not for answers, not even for closure. Just because I needed to talk to someone who was also living inside the fallout. Someone who didn't look at me like I had all the pieces and was just refusing to explain them. And we met up near the same cafe, though this time we didn't sit inside. We just stood by the bike rack out front, sipping iced tea from a place 2 blocks away and pretending like we were casual acquaintances, which I guess we technically were, though the shared damage between us made that feel like a joke neither of us wanted to laugh at. She didn't bring Avery this time, and I didn't ask why. Though I'm guessing she didn't want to risk the girl seeing me again and asking questions she wasn't ready to answer. And when I asked her how she was holding up, she paused long enough that I started to regret asking, but then she said something that stuck with me harder than I expected. She doesn't know anything yet. And honestly, I don't want to break what's left of the version of him she still believes in. I thought about that for a while. Let it settle inside me like gravel in a jar, shifting slowly every time I moved. And then I said something I didn't know I was going to say until it came out. You still have pieces. I only have what's true. And for a second, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, each with our backs slightly hunched like we were trying to make ourselves smaller, more manageable. Like if we shrank down just enough we could slip past the ache without anyone noticing. By the time I got back home, the sun was low and the air had that late fall bite that always smells like dead leaves and windshield wiper fluid. And when I walked into the house and kicked off my shoes, the first thing I noticed was that the lamp in the living room was still on, even though no one was there. And my mom's tea mug sat half finished on the table with the same lip print on the rim it had when I left earlier that day. The next day at school, my English teacher passed out a writing prompt. One of those generic, write about someone you admire essays that everyone always uses to talk about athletes or musicians or their grandmother. And as soon as I read the title at the top of the page, something inside me went blank. Not in a panicked way, but in that numb, too quiet kind of way that makes your hand freeze over the page like your body knows better than to try and fake it again. So I didn't write anything. I just sat there for the whole period with the paper in front of me, staring at the lines like they were daring me to lie, and when the bell rang, I handed it in exactly as it was. Blank, except for my name and the date, and the corner slightly creased from where I gripped it too hard without realizing. That night, I opened a new doc on my laptop. Not a letter to Cassie, and definitely not to my dad, but something else entirely, something that didn't need to go anywhere or be seen by anyone. And I titled it, Things I Remember Differently Now. Because if I've learned anything from all of this, it's that memory is a traitor when you're the only one left still telling the truth. And I think maybe that's okay. Maybe that's the only thing I get to keep. When Mom told me she had filed for divorce, she didn't say it like an announcement or something that needed a response. She just said it while standing by the sink, rinsing a chipped mug she'd used every morning since I was 10, And her tone didn't hold anger or relief, just this quiet, dry finality, like someone stating the weather forecast without looking out the window first. She asked me not to come to the hearing, not because she didn't want me involved, but because she said she needed to do this alone, not as someone's mother or wife, but just as a person trying to unstick herself from a life that had hardened around her like dried glue. And when I nodded and didn't argue, I think that was the moment she finally believed I had changed too. I didn't tell anyone at school. I didn't update my status or text Parker or even mention it to my sister. Not because it wasn't important, but because by then it had stopped being a headline and started feeling more like an old bruise you keep bumping into but no longer explain. And most days I didn't have the energy to drag other people through the mess I'd already accepted wasn't going to get cleaned up with words. He started calling again the week after she filed. Not constantly, not with demands or guilt trips like I half expected, but with these long voicemails where his voice sounded heavier than I remembered, like every word was being dragged up from the bottom of something dark and full of dust, and he said things like, "I know I messed everything up, and you'll always be my son even if you hate me. And once even, I still keep your baseball glove in the trunk. I don't know why." And the thing is, I listened. Not all at once, not every day, but I listened. Sometimes in the garage with the light off, sometimes while staring out the window with one AirPod in like it was a podcast I couldn't recommend to anyone, and I didn't cry or get angry or scream. Because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped feeling like I owed him that kind of energy. I deleted his number the third time I caught myself waiting for the phone to light up. Not because I hated him or wanted to punish him, but because I realized I couldn't carry his voice around like a leash anymore. Couldn't keep checking for proof that he still cared when I already knew that caring doesn't always come with action. I didn't reply to his messages. I didn't write him back when he tried to email through an old account or when he sent a card through my school's mailing address with my name written in handwriting that looked shakier than I remembered. And not because I was trying to be cruel, but because I knew that whatever came next in his life wasn't mine to witness anymore. At graduation, when they called my name and I walked across the stage, I didn't think about whether he would have been proud or if he would have cried because the truth is, I didn't want him there. Not because I wanted to erase him, but because I wanted that moment to belong only to me. Not to the version of me he made up or the one he left behind, but the one who had survived the weight of his absence and the noise of his apologies. I gave a short speech because I'd been voted to, and when I stood at the microphone and looked at all those folding chairs and sunburned parents and bored siblings, I didn't talk about family or tradition or gratitude. I talked about truth and about how sometimes the thing that breaks you is the thing that lets you finally breathe without waiting for permission. 2 weeks after graduation, a small envelope arrived in the mail, the kind that doesn't look important until you open it and realize someone put their entire heart into 3 inches of lined paper. And inside was a drawing, clearly done in crayon, with a giant yellow sun and a stick figure boy standing next to a shorter girl with matching smiles and messy shoes. And at the top, in uneven handwriting, it said, "For Tyler, from your sister." And yeah, I broke a little. I sat on the floor of my room with the envelope still in my lap, and I just stared at the drawing for maybe 10 minutes, not thinking, not trying to figure out how she knew or who told her, or what Cassie said when Avery asked where I went, because none of that mattered more than the fact that someone out there still drew me as part of her sky. I didn't frame it. I didn't hang it up. I folded it back up carefully, slid it between the pages of a book I haven't read yet, and told myself that maybe one day I'd be able to look at it without my throat tightening in that weird, sideways way it does when your body remembers something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. In August, I left for Portland. Not because it was far or prestigious or some dream school, but because it was somewhere new. Somewhere with tall trees and early rain, and people who didn't know how many versions of me had already been buried under someone else's expectations. And I picked psychology not because I thought I could fix anyone, but because I wanted to understand why people throw matches over their shoulders and then act surprised when things burn. Sometime in September, a letter came. Not typed, not emailed, an actual letter on paper that smelled faintly like cologne and carried his handwriting in that half neat, half slanted way that always looked like he was trying to hide how unsure he felt. And the first line said, "You can hate me if you want, but you've always been the best thing I ever did." And the rest of the page felt like a confession someone wrote to the air, hoping the wind would carry it somewhere that didn't require forgiveness. I didn't reply. I didn't tear it up either. I just put it back in the envelope, tucked it under my bed, and told myself that not answering was its own kind of answer. The kind that doesn't scream or slam doors, but simply says, "This road no longer leads to me." Last week, I went back to Boise for a weekend. Not for family, not for closure, just because I needed to see the place where all of this started from a distance that didn't make me flinch anymore. And I ended up in the park we used to go to when I was small enough to ride on his shoulders and still believed he could reach the top branches if I asked him to. The bench was still there, worn now, one screw missing from the armrest, a little crooked from years of use and weather, and I sat down without meaning to say anything or cry or even think too hard. I just sat, let the wind hit my face, and stared at the same view we used to stare at together, back when things were simpler, even if they were never honest. And I didn't say a word. I didn't need to, because sometimes the loudest truth is the one you stop explaining. And silence, real silence, doesn't mean nothing. Sometimes it means peace.